Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at KO-online.com. Hello and welcome to the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette. As we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their journey in and around the world of martial arts. My guest today is a chair and associate professor of film and television at the University of Colorado, Denver. He's been making independent films in a variety of genres for years. He's been a Fulbright Scholar and won an Emmy for his documentary Mortal Lessons in 2010. His latest feature film, A Feral World, is currently being distributed internationally through Garvitas Ventures, and he is currently in pre-production for a new feature called Publish or Perish. Of course, none of that has anything to do with martial arts, so why are we talking to this gentleman? Well, the reason I discovered David is because of an amazing documentary titled Looking for Mr. Miyagi, which will definitely be part of our discussion today. So please welcome to the show, Mr. David Liban. How are you doing today this morning, sir?
I am well. Thank you for that lovely intro.
My pleasure. That's one thing I take pride in. I do voiceover also. So I try to give the guests some good intros, but kind of, first of all, to get started, like we do with all my guests, let's kind of go back to the beginning. I know your story's kind of unique and stuff, and I think you're one of only 2 or 3 guests I've had that in their story they studied martial arts long ago and took a very long break and came back to it. But we want to know about that first time. What was that? What led to that first interest and that first spark in martial arts for you?
It was just like all kids growing up in the time in the 70s, and we all liked Bruce Lee and all that kind of stuff. So I've always been interested in it. And then when I went to college, there was a physical ed requirement, and my roommate at the time said, "Hey, you should check out karate. It's really great." So I did, and I thought it was terrific. I really, really enjoyed it. That one was, I think I studied, it was Hayashi Shitaru. We studied that. And then I did that for my whole time in college. So that was what initially got me interested. Just a friend said, "Hey, you should check this out."
So what once you tried that first class, what kind of kept the interest? What drew you to it, made you want to keep going?
Boy, that's a tough question. I mean, it was something about the the practice, the discipline, the ability. You're not just lifting weights up and down for no purpose. You're also bettering yourself, and you have the ability, ultimately to protect yourself, or even if it's somewhat a facade at some level, it's also there's something to be said for just self-improvement. And it was just an enjoyable Zen-like sort of feeling that came over me by doing it.
Nice. And what was it about that first instructor? What kind of stood out about that instructor, and it's some things you maybe remember about some of those classes?
I remember he had this aura about him, I was new to the Japanese traditional martial arts. He came in the room and everybody stopped what they were doing and we all bowed towards him. And I was like, "What's with this guy?" I didn't know that was the rank. That was what you just did. And his expertise and, his authority and, his confidence, all that stuff, and then when you got to see what he was able to do with his body and the kind of techniques and the way he thought about the things that he was teaching, all that stuff resonated with me.
And you said about 3 or 4 years, what belt did you get to?
When I was there, I was a green belt. So
okay.
in Shitaru, I think it was that was the 3rd ranking in that one.
Okay. And then obviously you said you did that through college. So when college was done, did you at all consider sticking with it as your life went on?
I did. I remember when I finished college and I moved back to my hometown, which was Little Neck, New York. I did look around, and I didn't really want to start a whole brand new style, so I was looking for something more or less similar to what I was doing. And I don't know, I didn't find anything that really I liked a lot. It had sort of something about it I didn't really like. You show up to to the dojo and they pull out a laminated piece of paper that tells you like, okay, this is how much it's going to cost, and you're going to get a black belt, by this time. And I remember thinking like, how do you know how long it's going to take? So therefore, they were selling the notion of black belt more than they were selling the notion of martial arts. And so it just didn't really I didn't really like the way they were trying to market the thing. And I understand it was a business and all that, but at the same point, it just felt sort of, I don't know, too commercialized.
Yeah, the black belt contract. I've
Yes.
seen that at a handful of schools and cringe every time. I remember the first time a coworker's like, "Oh, my son just signed up and he'll have his black belt on this date." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like,
How do you know that?
And it was 18 months later. That's the scary part. I'm like, "No, I don't care how good you are. You can't get a black belt in 18 months."
Yeah,
So,
I have a friend of mine, and his daughter got a black belt, and like I've seen her train, like their version of black belt versus the ones at our dojo is quite different.
yeah, I think normally, for at least in my experience, the ones that do that are a lot more sport orientated. It's flat out a sport. It's barely a martial art. It's strictly for
Yeah,
competition. Yeah, it's
agreed.
different. So then, how long was the break? After
Wow.
college.
Okay, so I graduated. Let's see, it was probably 30 years.
Wow. Okay, that's even more than my last guess. I think my last guess was a little over 20. So
Yeah.
so talk about that. Kind of what led to you getting back into it?
Well, which I kind of explore in the movie. I
Right.
was at a point where like I had our second child. I was overweight. I was feeling like I couldn't find my own space, and I couldn't really figure out how to kind of be at ease. I was facing some depression, and so I just sort of revisited like, well, what part of my life really sort of felt a little bit more tranquil. And then I thought back to the days when I was studying martial arts and I was studying karate. And I remember telling somebody, yeah, I remember really loving karate. I'm like, well, why don't you do it now? Like, I couldn't come up with a good answer. And so I did a little research and I found this terrific teacher here in Denver where I live. And he, I just tried it out and immediately just like, okay, this is the guy. Like, I felt like this was a terrific, amazing sensei.
And what's
Yeah.
the current style?
Shotokan.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did Shotokan in high school, so
Ah.
it's a great, and it's Japanese also. So I suppose it felt a little similar to what you did before.
Yeah, it's very similar. Like, even the katas were similar in as far as like the patterns in which we move. A lot of the similar, everything was very, very familiar to me. Yes.
Nice. So then, the idea for the documentary, I'm assuming the martial arts came first, and then the idea for the documentary came next. Just talk a little about that. What obviously it's what you do, but it's obviously a great idea that worked out well.
Yeah. So I guess it was, the idea, there's a couple things, like there's a whole lot. So there was the idea of like, I am a filmmaker and I'm also a professor. And, when I make films, you tend to spend a whole lot of time sitting and editing and not moving. And it's really, really caustic and toxic to my body, like making and editing a movie. So, people think that you're just running around with a camera, but I'd say the majority of it is sitting behind a computer, so I liked the idea of I mean, I don't really love being in front of a camera. That's not my comfort zone. However, I didn't really have a budget for this. And it was more like, well, what if I try to, if I put myself in front of the camera and give myself this goal, not only am I getting the goal of a black belt, but I'm also creating this documentary to help other people be inspired and to just, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. That's the thing about these things is like, you never really know like what's going to happen as you kind of do this kind of journey. But it was a little bit of that. It was just like to create a documentary, to keep myself active, and also to really enforce my goals of trying, not that I really felt like I was going to give up, but at the same point, I felt like, I had this added pressure on top of me, which I don't recommend and I wouldn't do again in the future. Like, but once I started and went down that path, I got, students got involved and people were helping me. And at my dojo, the senseis really don't like having cameras in there, especially during testing and things, but they saw the value of it as well as for inspiring other people. And so they kind of broke their own rules a little bit to help me make the thing.
I was wondering about that because, I know a lot of the traditional ones, even pictures sometimes aren't allowed. And so I was kind of impressive you got them to do that.
Yeah, not only, which is surprising too, given, how many, different levels of approval we had to go to, but they all said, yeah.
So how'd you come up with the name? I mean, obviously everyone, for the most part, I think anyone listening to my show knows who Mr. Miyagi is, but, and also was there other names you thought of first?
Not really. I always have trouble with names, titles and endings. Those are the hardest parts of designing a piece. But, I love the Mr. Miyagi character, and, in my mind, it wasn't just, having a sensei, in my mind was having, it's not necessarily, I don't think of my sensei as a father figure, but certainly as a guide and as somebody who inspires and makes me think about, things in life that only martial artists kind of get. In my mind, I really loved the character of Mr. Miyagi. And I remember when I was in college and the Karate Kid came out, I remember coming back after the break of whatever that was. And, our sensei at the time saying something like, no, you cannot learn karate by waxing a car, and so, but it was really just the idea of having a mentor and, ironically, what I imagined somebody to be as far as a sensei, I always imagined it in my mind to be somebody a little bit more, I don't know, Zen-like and monk-like, like that kind of thing. But the senseis in America that I have run into are not like that at all.
True.
They're a little bit more, defense-minded and, not for better, for worse, they're looking at the world from a place where at any point someone may attack you and you got to be ready, not like, at the same point, they say out loud, the example of a perfect martial artist is somebody who trains for 50 years and never has to use it. At this, he says that, and then 2 minutes later, is like, well, if you need to break somebody's leg, here's how you do that.
Nice. Yeah. So at any time during the experience, I know it had its ups and downs. There was some. Did you ever even think of stopping, not finishing the project, not continuing with martial arts?
I never really thought that I wouldn't finish the project,
Nice.
But I remember having this discussion with my wife. I'm like, oh my God, am I making a fool of myself? Am I I'm putting myself out there? I'm taking my shirt off and I'm overweight. And it was the whole thing was oh my, should I be doing this? This is, am I exposing my personal life in a way that maybe isn't really going to be beneficial?
Mm-hmm.
I was really afraid that I was making a fool of myself and, but the response I get is, it was, makes it more human, people understand because we all go through these same sort of journey and problems and issues. So
it's inspiring for sure. I mean, so have you met others that decided to get involved in martial arts at a later age because of seeing the video?
It's funny, so I finished the documentary, I want to say 8 years ago, I think. And I get emails to this day, thank you for making this documentary. I've been out of karate for a while or martial arts for a while. I saw your documentary or else they'll, I leave, my film ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger, whether or not I get the black belt, and people will, email me, hey, did you ever get your black belt? So people to this day, I mean, at least once or twice a week, I get somebody who says, thank you. And from all over the world too, from different countries. It's really very, very nice to get those kind of emails.
I've sent the link to many people who are on the fence about either getting back into it or even starting it for the first time. That's one thing. I've been a martial artist myself since 1984, and people I try to get, oh no, I'm too old. I'm like, oh, my mom joined in her 40s and got her black belt. So it's, anyone can do it. There's, yes, maybe not anyone can do any style at any age, but there's something out there for everyone. And I personally, I just think everyone should try martial arts at least some point in their life.
Absolutely. And if you look at the people who do it for that period of time. Like my sensei is in his 80s. If you look at him, he does not look like he is in his 80s. You know, like
I would have never guessed that. Wow.
yeah. No, actually, I'm sorry. He's in his 70s. He's
Well,
in his
still,
70s.
I
Yeah.
honestly, I would have probably guessed high 50s.
Yeah.
To
So,
see
and all the people that are, you know, they age differently, you
Mhm.
know, like they don't like the longevity, you know, is long. Yeah. I don't know if it necessarily extends your life, maybe a few years here and there, but you certainly live a healthier life, you know, as you age as well, because you're using your body in ways and you're stretching and you're doing things with your spine that most people do not do, you know, so there is a lot of value to it there.
So then when you finish first of all, how long did the whole process take? The video up until when you started and then up until your black belt test?
I want to say I started when I was 46 on the film, and I finished when I was just turned 50. So it was about a 4-year project.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing like a normal films you work on, it's usually not that long of a project, or is it?
You know, it's funny you say that because well, mostly no, right?
Okay.
But documentaries are a little bit different than like a narrative or a fiction piece
Mm-hmm.
because, like, you know, you work with small crews and little money, and you gather a little bit of material here, a little, and you know, the film sometimes makes itself known by you making it. Where when you make a fiction piece with a script, you know, you have a blueprint of what it's going to look like. That being said, my last film, A Feral World, we kind of did it a little bit different. Also, like the film Boyhood, we shot it over the course of 4 years so that you can see the characters age because they were kids over the
Okay.
course of the movie. So, so that movie also took about that time, but then I don't really ever want to do that again because the thing is on your mind for so many years. It's like, oh God, I got to move on, you know. So,
Man, yeah, that's a big part of your life. So,
yeah.
how much? I'm curious. How much footage did you have at the end? How many hours of footage that you had to edit down from?
Oh boy, I really don't know.
No.
I'm not. I can't even. I don't. It's been so long,
Yeah,
but I still
I'm
have
guessing
like
a lot.
a lot. Yeah, I have hours and hours and hours, and you know, there's so much of it that, you know, there's only so much. I don't really enjoy watching people train,
Right.
even like, you know, in Rocky, you know, like that was exciting to, you know, with the
Yeah.
music and he runs up and down the stairs and stuff. It's like that's kind of inspiring, but what is it, like a 30-second piece, you know, like
Yeah,
it's
probably.
like when so like watching me train, I don't, you know, I wanted to keep that to a minimum because I don't think that's very interesting to watch, you know.
So you're not going to be releasing the 4-hour Liban cut?
Yeah, no one wants to see that.
I'm sure there's some that would actually watch it, but yeah, I understand.
Maybe
that.
somebody, yeah, somebody.
And then, so when it was all done, was there any question at all whether or not you were going to continue with it and continue with martial arts?
No, not at all.
Nice.
I wasn't making the movie simply to get the black belt. I was just a documentation of my process. So I never really planned on stopping. You know, that was not even in the cards. But there have been, like, since I made it, there have been there's like when I was making my last movie, like I did take a little bit of a break for a few months while I was working on that, but I came back to it. So
Life gets in the way. I know that
sometimes,
for sure.
yeah.
I know I took up to a 3-year break one time, so I definitely know that. But so,
Yeah.
and obviously, you know, we originally were supposed to do this interview about a week ago, but something kind of important came up. You know, is that something we can talk about a
Yeah,
little bit? Why we had to reschedule?
Yeah, so we were scheduled to talk last Thursday, and that won't mean anything to the recorded
Right.
listeners. However, that was the same day I was testing for my Nidon, my second degree black belt, and I didn't. It was a karma thing. It's like, oh boy, I don't know if I should talk about this on this. That night, I was going to go and then test, you know, and I was pretty nervous about it anyway as well.
Right.
And so between the idea of, like, you know, talking about it prior to doing it, and also like you know, maybe it would be more interesting to know the result, you know, for this podcast versus, you know, just saying, hey, well, good luck and goodbye, you know. So
Definitely. Yeah. And then, so compared to the first degree test, how long was this test, and you know, how different was it from the first degree test?
Well, what's interesting about this test was that my sensei is retiring at the end of this year.
Oh.
So this was his last opportunity to do these dawn exams for his dojo. And so, you know, it was very special for us because, you know, he went out of his way to make sure that he would be able to do this before he was gone. and we did it in a little in our own home dojo. Like in the past, it was like a much bigger event,
Right.
where there was in like a, where there was a tournament going on, and there was, all these high ranking people from not from the dojo, from the, it was the ISKF, like that's it. So they were all, usually it's like this giant table of all these people. And that was just two high ranking people. And it was a lot less stressful. It was just testing the people from our dojo versus like everybody in the region, so that was a lot less stressful. And I really appreciated that.
How about the physicality portion of it? How different was it from your first one? Because I know some people, as you get higher up in ranks, it's a lot less physical and more mental and stuff like that. So I mean, how physically hard?
I would say the physicality was more or less the same. In fact,
okay.
in our style, as you move up the ranks, there's greater expectation. Like, the first degree black belt is largely about proving that you can master the basics,
right.
And then the next step up is like, okay, now they give you more complex combinations that you have to do, and the katas that you have to do are a little bit higher up. And then they also, in sparring, it's a little bit different. Like you have different expectations in sparring. So I would say, it was equally as, challenging as far as what we have to do with our, physicality part of it. But it didn't seem greater. It just seemed more, a little bit more difficult techniques, really.
So do you think you felt more prepared for your Nidan?
It was a long break. Like, I tested for my first degree black belt after only coming back to karate for 4 years, right? So this one, it's been 8 years since I got my Shodan. So I had a lot more training in between there. So part of me felt like everyone's like, "Oh, you got this. You've been doing this for so long. Everyone's fine," but you never really know,
Right. So now, after you've been doing this now for quite a while, for about 12 years, so have you started assisting and teaching at all? Is that something that you enjoy?
I haven't yet. Here and there, I've done that when I've asked. In our style, like the sensei will always ask the highest ranking person first before they. So like, there's still people that outrank me, so they ask them to do it first. But I'm certainly open to doing that should it come about.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously teaching's in your background for your normal job, so I would think that would kind of maybe come natural to you. And I know one thing most martial artists I've interviewed say, once they start teaching, they become better martial artists themselves. So
absolutely. I mean, that's for any teacher, really. Is like, if you really want to get to know something, you teach it, because you kind of have to look at it from a whole different angle and think about it in different ways.
And I do have to ask now, one person who was featured in your documentary that wasn't actually Shotokan. I'm just curious how that came about. It was actually another guest of mine, Chris Wilder. How did you meet Chris, and how did he become part of the documentary?
Oh, Chris is a great guy. I really like Chris.
He is.
I read a couple of his books, and so when I was doing research for the film, I just reached out to him through, just because I thought he had a lot to say, and I wanted to see if he wanted to be interviewed based on the fact that he wrote this book. And that's basically how it was. I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you mind being interviewed?" So he, on his own dime, he flew out to Colorado to be a part of it. So it was really terrific. Yeah.
Nice. So now, could you see yourself doing another martial arts type movie, whether it's maybe not a documentary, but maybe a fiction or an actual scripted martial arts type movie?
I would never say never. I mean, I have to say that my expertise in filmmaking is not, choreography, like action choreo. That's not really what I do well. I mean, I could certainly collaborate with somebody who has the ability to do that kind of choreography, but that's not my skill set. So I would never say never, but it's not where my head is at the moment. I'm sort of leaning more towards like dark comedy kind of thing.
What about if an instructor were to approach you and want to make some instructional videos? Would that be a project you'd be willing to help with, or would that be maybe a little too much extra work, kind of like a documentary?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go down that path.
Just had to ask, because I know that's definitely a lot of them out there, and especially with virtual teaching now and stuff being a lot bigger thing after COVID. So
I mean, I think there's a lot of value in it, but I'm at a point in my career where I really want to make feature films, and that is so encompassing that I don't know if I have the bandwidth to do that other kind of stuff.
That's one thing I should have asked you. So with COVID, now how much did that interrupt your training, and how much did that interrupt your normal 9-to-5 job also?
Oh, like everybody, it completely upset it. I mean, our dojo was closed for a lot of time, and And so our sensei, what we would do is like near like halfway point of 2020, when the weather started getting warm, we would all go to there's like at our dojo outside, there was this big grassy area. So we would stand 6 feet apart wearing masks, and we would do some training. So it was
Nice.
only once a week though, so it was slowly getting us back to doing it and being part of our community. But there was a lot of sitting and not training. I could have trained in my house, but I don't know, we just didn't.
Yeah. And what
As
about
far as our job though,
yeah.
like it definitely, like as a teacher, teaching through Zoom, and especially when I teach film production through a Zoom thing, just doesn't work well.
I can't, I was thinking about that. I can't imagine that would be too easy to do. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've done audio production. I've learned some audio production through Zoom, and that's even a little more difficult. I imagine video would be 10 times worse. So,
Yeah, and people don't really stay tuned, like if when they're on Zoom, they just turn off the camera and you don't know if you're talking to anybody. You don't even know if they're even really, sitting in front of the computer or not. So it's really it feels like you have no audience.
oh, definitely. So, if someone approached you and said, "Hey, I saw the documentary. I'm thinking of getting involved in martial arts for the first time in my life," what tips would you give them on what to look for in a school, what to look for in an instructor, and maybe some things on what they should avoid?
I would say you definitely want to try out a few different, styles, because they are very different. And, if you don't know what you're doing, you might be sold by the laminated, this is how long it takes to get a black belt. Don't be persuaded by the idea of getting a black belt, because the black belt doesn't mean anything. It's just a way for you to think about your training and have objectives to get to a certain place. But as you know, if you've been training long enough, that the black belt does not make you invincible. It does not make you magical. It's just you could still get hurt pretty bad, so it doesn't matter. However, I would say, like, try different styles. I like Shotokan because I don't want to get thrown around a lot. I like the idea of Aikido. I like the idea of jujitsu, but I don't want to be thrown on the floor. And I mean, I'm in my mid 50s now. It's not my way anymore. So, like, the style that I do, it's really, you're all from a standing position, and it's a very, it's not a very showy style. It's very practical. You block, you strike, you get out. And that's kind of the philosophy. So I would say really figure out what is important to you, and where you are physically in your life, to try to determine the right style.
Nice. Oh, one thing I forgot to ask you, did in all your years now, have you done anything with competition? Has that ever been a part of the martial arts that has interested you at all?
We do have competitions with the ISKF.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to COVID, it was every year. We would do it in March, and you did sparring, you did kata. There's this dichotomy though, because all of the senseis always say that the downfall of martial arts is when they made it competitive. That where, like, it's a way of life. It isn't something to gain a medal for. And then they go ahead and then they have these tournaments and give out medals. So
Yep.
like, I don't really know, and then there's another guy in the documentary who's like a war, he's a really high ranking jujitsu guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a really good point. Is like, if you were, a long distance runner, or you jog every day, at some point you want to know, how do you compare with other people? So it's just a way of sort of gauging where you are. So I see the value in it. But in Shotokan, they really sort of look down upon sport karate versus a way of life.
Right. No, that's me. I've never been. I love training other people for competition. I've just never been one who's enjoyed competing. I've entered one
I don't
tournament.
like it either. I don't like it at all. Like I don't know. It's not where my head is. Getting a medal doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah. And you have to enjoy it. I mean, if you don't enjoy it, what's the point of doing it? And I know
Exactly.
and I've told the story before. I had a previous instructor that actually used to force his students to competition. That's one reason I left his school. So, yeah. So then you've been primarily a traditional martial artist for all these years. What are your thoughts on, and I know you talk a little bit about it in the documentary with, your one of your trainers and the jiu-jitsu gentleman. What are your thoughts on MMA and the UFC, and are you a fan?
I don't really have a problem with it. If this is what people like to do, I get it. Like, it's fun to watch that stuff. And these guys are amazing fighters, and they clearly are driven to do it. it doesn't interest me at all. As I'm too old to even go there, but like the idea of getting in a ring and beating each other up is just, it's brutal. And, I don't like that part of it. I like the peaceful, when I spar in my dojo, we do it with friends, because we're helping each other get better. And I feel like that's the best way to kind of learn, is you kind of do it that way. So I'm not a big fan of the MMA. I don't really follow it. I couldn't tell you one guy's name who trains, and does more MMA. But when I come across it here and there, I do watch it, and I admire what they're doing, but it's just not my thing.
Nice. And then, so throughout the thing of the documentary and in your years of training now, have your wife or kids shown any interest in martial arts?
My wife, in theory, did.
Okay.
But, she doesn't like the idea of getting bruised, and, it wasn't her thing at all, really. That's not hers. But my kids tried it.
Okay.
And my sensei, Sensei Swain, he's pretty tough on kids. He loses his patience pretty quickly, like where, if I said right foot, not left, like he gets very angry. He loses his patience with kids, and he does it with the adults too. I'm a grown up. I don't care. All right, I'm sorry, whatever. I'll change my foot. So, right. But the little kids, it's tough on, and so they didn't really respond to that style of teaching very well. And it was, my older son ended up going into different types of athletics, and my younger son is thinking about going back to it at some point soon, but
cool.
We'll see. But they did try it, and they actually showed a lot of promise, in my opinion, but they just didn't stick with it. So hopefully
they will. I mean, it's
yeah,
every kid's different. A lot of kids will try it, or their parents will put them in it, and they'll do it for years and then just walk away. And and kind of like your story, we've had students that are like, I trained when I was like 8 or 9, and now I'm 30, I'm coming back. So it's you hope it's something that still stays down in there, and at some point it'll. Same thing with my kids. All 3 of my kids did it from age 5 through like 14, 15, and then stopped. And I'm hoping that they'll come back someday.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is like, I don't believe in like making my kids do like, okay, it's Tuesday, you're going to karate, or like. I don't feel like they have to. I mean, I'm happy to take them if they say, I want to do this. Then I'm like, all right, let's go. But like, I don't want to force them to do it. So I introduce them, and then it's up to them, because I feel like kids kind of have to do it on their own at some level. So
no, I agree completely.
Yeah.
So if you had to pick one martial artist to put at the top of your list, just someone you truly admire, who would be up there? And if you can't pick just one, most of my guests usually pick more than one, but I always ask for one.
Yeah, who oh gosh, his name escapes me. Give me the guy. Oh, he is in the movie The Protector. He's Thai.
Oh, Tony Ya.
Tony Jaa.
Yeah.
That guy. Oh my God, he is amazing.
he's fun. I love Ong Bak. That was the first one I saw him in, and that chase sequence that was shot in one take was just mind blowing.
Oh, the one in The Protector?
Well, the one in Ong Bak actually is the one I'm thinking of. I actually just bought The Protector 2. I found it at a local store for like $2 on DVD. I haven't watched it yet.
The Protector, I show that in my class from sometimes.
Really?
As far as like the choreography, and like, it's just truly incredible. He's just an amazing martial artist. The guy who was in the Shang-Chi movie, I don't know his name.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. That's a great movie. Some great martial arts in that too.
Yeah, and Donnie Yen, I'm a big fan of. I like that guy.
Yep. Yeah, the Ip Man movies, and yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it's to me, it's now it's actually feeling like kind of like the 80s, when you had every week there seemed to be a Seagal movie, a Van Damme movie, a Chuck Norris movie, and now we're kind of getting back to that, where there's a lot more martial arts in the mainstream. We kind of took a break for a while where there wasn't a lot.
Yeah, I have a good friend who he loves like these cheesy, Chinese kung fu movies.
Yep.
And I mean, I admire them at some level, but to me, like, they become all blended into one after a while. And, I don't like the wire work kind of stuff as much,
Yeah.
but I love John Wick. I thought John Wick was a great movie, as far as like the martial arts, and even in that, that movie with Tom Cruise called Collateral?
I love that movie. Yeah.
He's not really set up to be a martial artist, but the things that he does, it's very quick, brief, and it feels real, as opposed to like very showy.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I really liked about that, is just like, bam, and he's gone. He moves on. I really like that.
Kind of the same with like some of the Jason Bourne movies with Matt Damon. Some of those fight scenes are
Yes,
just
agreed.
yeah, just
Yeah.
and the one thing I like about those is they're realistic compared to some others. It's very
At
realistic
some
fight
level,
scene. Yeah.
aside from like the flying through the window stuff,
Oh, oh, come on! I do that every day.
yeah, that's part of our katas. We jump through the
See,
windows.
that's for third degree. Come on, flying through the windows part of third degree test. Be ready for that. So,
Yeah, I'll start practicing.
so do you have one martial arts philosophy you've learned in all these years of training that kind of stands on the top for you and you keep coming back to?
Yeah, I would say, it sounds kind of lame at level, but you just keep training. You just, you don't worry, like just go. Like there are days where you don't feel like going, but like you walk in those doors and you do it and you always are glad that you did most of the time, unless you get hurt or something. But I would say that, you just, overcome the couch calling out to you and just really just do it. And that's what I always just remind. I was like, I'm gonna feel better when when I get back, and I'm gonna be so happy that I went. And that is always the case,
Yep.
like I said, unless there's an injury that happens. But
See,
yeah,
and that's one thing. Like me, I'm one who I'll even go when I'm injured, and my instructor will know it, and he'll be like, "You should not be here," because sometimes I
he does
push it
tell
too
us
hard.
like if you are injured, he'll say like, just let me know. If you can't, if you hurt your hamstring, you can't throw a kick. Don't just lift your leg up for the drills and don't worry about it. Like so he's sensitive to that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So a few fun ones to wrap it up. This one I'm curious. Your favorite martial arts book?
Oh, Waking Dragons. That's the one that I really like a lot.
Nice. I don't think I've heard that one. So who's that one by? What's a little bit about it?
Okay, so yeah, it's by Waking Dragons by Goran Powell. And it's not about my style at all, but it's a 30-man kumite fight that they have to do. It's like one of the toughest tests. And so it's really well written and it's very engaging and it's far more brutal than what kind of training I deal with, but these guys will train for like, they'll fight 30 people like for a minute each one of those people as part of their test.
Okay.
And these are like full contact. So it's really quite good. I really enjoyed that book.
Oh, I'll have to check that. I know I've heard of the 100-man kumite, the Masoyama thing, but I'll have to. I'm actually bookmarking this right now. I'm gonna have to order this book and check it out. That's why I like that question. It adds to my library.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I really enjoy that book. I'm looking at my library right here. I do like also, Chris Wilder's book about ways to the black belt. I thought that was very inspiring for me. Also, it's called Living the Martial Way. Yeah, that was by Forrest E. Morgan. So Living the Martial Way, a manual for the way of a modern warrior should think. And that was really a great book. That one is another one that was very inspiring, and that's why I interviewed him in the movie as well, because it was just very, very. It was great for me to read that as I was just getting back into karate.
Nice. I'll add that one to my list too. All right. Now you went to college in the 80s, so I'm not sure if you ever got into video games, but if you did, do you have a favorite martial arts video game?
I do play video games from time to time. Not really. I tend to go more for the role playing games,
Okay.
So yeah.
No, that's okay. All right,
Yeah.
two final ones. These ones with your background and your job. I'm really curious about these next two. Favorite martial arts TV show?
Oh, my favorite martial arts TV show. Let's see. I liked Into the Badlands. I thought that was really fun.
Great show. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one. That's. I was sad when it ended. It was
Yeah, me
really
too.
good. It ended way too soon. I think they could have done 2 or 3 more seasons easily.
I also like Daredevil. I think Daredevil is up there as well. I thought that was a terrific show.
Yeah, I think the Marvel ones on Netflix were just great. There's some good.
I wasn't a fan of the Iron Fist. I thought that was I felt that was unwatchable. Like I tried really hard because I like it in concept.
Yeah.
But it was,
See, I'm in the minority. I actually liked it, but I'm probably one of only like 5 people that actually liked it. So.
my buddy liked it as well.
Okay.
But I just couldn't stand it.
Nice. All right. Favorite martial arts movie, and you obviously can't pick your documentary.
My favorite martial arts movie. I have this big collection of DVDs and Blu-rays, and
Nice.
I would say it's The Protector.
Okay, nice. That's a good one. That's a good
Yeah.
solid one. That's one I have to definitely go back and watch. It's probably been 5 years since I've watched that, so I got about, I think, 70 or 80 martial arts movies in my collection. So and there's a handful that I watch every year. So.
Wait, no, I want to take that back. I think my favorite one is Red Belt.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that movie. Yeah.
That movie is terrific. And Protector is great. Yep. I really enjoy that movie, but this one I think I am drawn to it because it's a little more grounded. I feel like it's more relatable. It's less about getting revenge of your brother's death. And so, this one I felt was really, really great.
So I have to ask, kind of with your story and leaving for many years and coming back, have you seen the newer movie, The Paper Tigers?
I have not.
Oh, you should watch it. I think
it's called Paper Tigers.
Yep, Paper Tigers. I think you'd enjoy it. It's
that's been on my list for a long time. I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I think it's on Netflix now, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so I saw the trailer. I'm like, this looks really good, and I watched it right when it came out, and it was better than I thought it was going to be. Yeah,
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. I've watched it twice already. So
yeah,
nice. And then, so I know we talked a little bit about this, but so what do you think is the favorite your favorite martial arts fight scene? Not overall movie, just maybe one movie with I know you kind of talked about like Collateral and stuff like that. Can you pick one out? It's like a favorite fight scene.
Let me put some thought into that. Let's see here. My favorite martial arts fight scene. You know what? There's a couple of them that come to mind, so I'll throw out two of them that I always reference. That hallway scene in the Daredevil TV show. Yes. It's all one take and he's like throwing people through the door, and that is just awesome. I love that. That's one of my favorite ones. Let's see, what was the other one? The favorite scene is, like, I would say that Protector scene when the guy is running up the stairs and he's fighting off all these guys. That was amazing. Let me think. What was the other one that really comes to mind? Oh, which one I really like in the movie, The Book of Eli, when it's a post-apocalyptic show, but he's surrounded by all these bandits. There's a really great scene in that one where he's got like this short sword that he pulls off his back and just kind of wipes them all out.
Nice. I know when you first said the hallway scene, the first thing that popped into my head, I thought you were going to say the fight scene in Grosse Pointe Blank with John Cusack and his instructor, Benny the Jet Urquidez.
I love that movie. That's a great movie. Yes,
I know.
I forgot about that scene. Yes.
Yeah. I just think it's funny because he's fighting his own instructor, which is kind of cool, but
yes,
it's enjoyable. But David, I just want to thank you, man. It's been so much fun. I will put links for the documentary out there because it's so good. I've sent it to so many people, and it's an inspiring story. It's well done, and I'm so glad I'm glad we had to postpone the interview, and I'm so glad you got your knee down last week. That's such a great accomplishment. And
thank you. I appreciate it.
So is your goal, are you hoping to still be doing this when you're in your 70s like your instructor, and hopefully get to maybe third or fourth down? Or
I'm so relieved to not be testing, that the idea of testing again is not high on my priority list, but there's no question in my mind that I want to keep going.
Nice.
Like my best friends are in my dojo, that's where I go to, that's my community. That's what I like to do. And it keeps me sane. So I don't see myself stopping, as far as progressing and testing. It's not that important to me, but if the opportunity comes up and my sensei tells me I'm ready, then maybe I'll consider it. But
nice.
Yeah, just keep training.
Well, I'm hoping in a few years I see you up on the stage accepting an Academy Award, and I can be like, hey, I interviewed him way back when.
I sure hope that happens, but
hey, you never know, man. You got to start somewhere, and your stuff's great. And I'm going to check out some of your other stuff too, because some of your other projects sounds really good. So I'm definitely going to dig into more of those. But I truly appreciate your time, and it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks so much. I enjoyed it as well.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.